Hello, welcome to another episode of Storm Trackers. I am First Alert Storm Chaser Jared Burke here with First Alert meteorologist Alex Searl. We're going to kind of recap, do a couple things today. We're going to kind of recap the Gould tornado warning that we had back in early March, on March 2nd, I believe, on that Sunday on March 2nd. And then we are going to talk a little bit about the First Alert weather day we have tomorrow on Friday and kind of what we're expecting with that. And how are you doing today, Alex?
I'm doing good. How about yourself?
Well, so far so good. So let's go ahead and bring up this Gould tornado. So this was first tornado warning of the year?
Yeah. This is the first tornado warning of the year in Texoma. So, early March, a little bit early of a start to our storm season here.
Yeah. So, got a few screenshots just kind of from that day showing velocity and how it kind of transitioned through the day. And so let me restart it here, and let's do this differently.
Just ahead of.
All right, here we go. All right, so this was when the tornado warning first came out, which, as you can see, was right around 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Talk a little bit about, so this wasn't a typical setup for a tornado warning in Texoma. Normally we're chasing supercells, and the tornado warnings are, you can see the tornado a little bit more visible on the backside of those supercells with the hook echoes and things like this. This was a QLCS on the front end, on the front side of a squall line as it moved through the area. So talk about the difference in whenever you guys are following these types of storms, what you're looking for whenever you don't really see that classic hook echo or the classic like reds and greens real bright next to each other.
Yeah, so I mean the QLCS events are otherwise known as squall lines. If you look at radar, these are the type of events where you see just a straight line of storms north to south that might span hundreds of miles, sometimes even. I don't think this particular day was probably more than 100 miles or so. But so these are the line of storms that they'll come through, and essentially when these events happen, a lot of times, not every time, but a lot of the times it'll be kind of a lower cloud base in the atmosphere. So days like, especially in the early spring and late fall, when you have those lower cloud bases and you get these squall lines that develop, it doesn't take much rotation for a tornado to touch down to the ground because the cloud's already so low to the surface. So this tornado warning in particular, I don't believe it ever touched the ground. The National Weather Service never had any type of tornado rating with this one. So it was just a warned storm purely for rotation purposes. But the reason why squall lines like this will get tornado warnings will get issued with it, and going forward it'll continue to always be the case, is because it doesn't take much rotation for these storms to touch down and have a tornado. Now, granted, these storms typically aren't the big, strong tornadoes you think of when you think of supercells, or when you're thinking of strong tornadoes, you're always thinking of supercells. But these ones still, they can pack a punch when they touch the ground.
Yeah, I mean, I know that whenever we were preparing for this day, I was looking at some things, and I think like an EF3 is like the strongest tornado in Oklahoma that's come from a QLCS type systems, which is obviously a very strong tornado, but most of the time they're like EF zeros, EF1s, and they're normally short lived, because they're constantly just cutting themselves off with that front squall line pushing through. So, we were out there. This was the second scan that you're seeing on the screen right now. This was the kind of the third scan from radar, and normally you see the super bright reds and greens next to each other, but right in this picture, probably where there was the most rotation is going right over Highway 5, and that's where we were. So we were in the Storm Hunter following it. This was our view as we went live on air, as that thing was going right over Highway 5, and you can like you were talking about, like, obviously the clouds are very low. This was rain wrapped, so whenever we're out there chasing, it makes things a whole lot harder to see, because normally we like to be outside of the storm looking into it with no rain in the way. But this was looking right where radar was showing the rotation.
Yeah, and that's the other thing with the QLCSs too, as you pointed out. I'm sure you've seen plenty of that in your life. And whenever these QLCS or squall line tornado warnings happen, I mean, these are the ones that you can never see coming. They're always rain wrapped. They're always, it's going to be heavy rainfall. If you're lucky, you'll get a shot or two of it when some lightning flashes behind the tornado itself. But these are not the ones when you see videos online. It's almost never the squall line tornado warnings. It's always the supercells.
Yeah, and I think as we were live on air with you guys, just kind of showing you what we were seeing, that's kind of what I was saying was, we can't see a tornado touching the ground or anything whenever we're looking through all that rain like that. So I was looking for power flashes, and then as we got closer to where it on radar had crossed over Highway 5, started looking for any damage or anything, and we didn't see. There was no telephone poles down, no wires down, no damage to any structures or anything. So National Weather Service, I think, agreed, and we kind of said that day that don't believe this ever actually made it to the ground. This was a radar indicated storm from the beginning, but we treat them all obviously like there is actually something on the ground, just because everyone needs to be safe and take those precautions that are necessary. So and then this next scan was after it kind of crossed through the Gould area. It was going right through Gould, and then as it pushed off to the northeast, and even looks like in this actual scan right here, they had already canceled the tornado warning.
Yeah.
It's not showing up anymore. So,
and that's another classic thing with these too. A lot of times these squall line tornado warnings, they'll be issued for 30, 45 minutes, but they might actually only let it stay for 15 minutes, then they'll cancel it because the rotation will dissipate as fast as it forms. So they're very active in issuing those tornado warnings, but then they'll also take them off pretty quickly because the rotation pops up and goes away so quick.
Yeah, and this one, definitely just based on our clock there on the screen, it was only in effect for about 12 minutes. So that is, very short-lived. Whenever you got the QLCSs, they are more willing to kind of cancel those and not let them play out, where whenever you've got the supercells, it feels like they let those kind of run, even if you're not seeing it on a radar scan, or maybe one or two radar scans go by and you don't see it as pronounced as normal. They seem to kind of let those play out for 30 or 45 minutes.
And those ones have a habit too, the supercells of cycling or recycling, where they'll kind of weaken for a few radar scans and they ramp right back up. These ones have more of a history of they can do that, but they more times than not, it'll kind of, if it dissipates, it typically dissipates for a while. It's not just going to spark back up real quickly again.
Right. All right, so that's kind of just a little bit of a recap of our first tornado warning of the year. We had another tornado warning that was in Ouachita County a couple nights later in the overnight hours. It was technically a little bit out of our viewing area. I wasn't on that one. I was staying in our viewing area just in case something popped up. But we had that one that was up by in Ouachita County, up by where
I can't even remember the name of it, but it crossed pretty quickly. It was in the northern portion of Ouachita and it crossed towards, I believe it stayed just west of Weatherford, if I'm not mistaken.
Right. So, a couple tornado warnings early in the season. We thought that was a pretty active way to start the season. So, but we got some activity coming up tomorrow in a different form. We got a first alert weather day. Let's talk about that. We're at 65-mile-an-hour wind gusts possible. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah. So I have and this is just kind of what we're expecting tomorrow. The highlight bullet points. So high winds and fire danger. I have 60-mile-per-hour wind gust on here labeled. That's going to be kind of more the widespread effect. But like you said, we can't even isolate 65, maybe even 70-mile-per-hour wind gust. That'd be more isolated, though. I think the more widespread peak is going to be 60 mile per hour. I mean, and that's, if you're kind of wondering what that is related to storms, that's a low-end severe thunderstorm warning. But the difference is between this and that is that's going to be very isolated. This is widespread across all of Texoma. So it's not like you're going to dodge these winds like you could with storm activity. Like everyone's going to be seeing 60 mile per hour wind gusts tomorrow. And then the main concern with that, because we're going to have dry air, is going to be the fire danger. I have it written on there, humidity down as low as 10%, which that's very low by standards of when you're watching out for wildfire concerns. And then also blowing dust, that's also going to be a possibility as well. No guarantees on that, but I mean, we're going to see that southwestern wind. So obviously, when the winds are coming from the southwest, it's coming from the drier portions of like Texas and New Mexico and stuff like that. So we could certainly see some dust in the area when these winds are kind of at their peak. And I also have that on the graphic here as well. Late morning to evening hours is kind of when we expect these peak wind speeds.
Yeah, so of course, you got the internet meteorologists and things like that love to hype up events. And I've seen the word haboob thrown around. And I know West Texas, or the Texas Panhandle, may see some of that. Do you think that we will see, and maybe explain to the people what a haboob is?
Yeah, so technically that is not, some people like to use that term just in general when it relates to dust storms, but technically not all dust storms are haboobs. Haboobs are typically related specifically to an outflow from a storm collapsing. And we're not going to have any storm activity tomorrow. It's just going to be straight line winds for the most part. So I don't see it necessarily that, but we could see dust in the area. I don't think it's going to be as blinding as probably what some people think of when you think of like these dust storms. Like I was just watching some videos on it a little bit before this podcast here of like Arizona. You see some dust storms where visibilities are down super low. I don't think we're going to get like that necessarily, but certainly I could see some haziness in the air tomorrow. And I mean, I guess if it did get that bad, I mean, the best thing you can do is just stay stationary and not try to drive through it and stuff like that. But I don't see anything too crazy from that. Just maybe a little bit of a haziness in the sky at its peak is what I'm expecting.
Yeah, and as a volunteer firefighter, which I am, days like this just start scaring me and worrying me about the fire dangers, because if one does spark and it gets into the wrong area, where you don't have the ability to get out in front of it and stop it, tomorrow you could see fires push miles before firefighters are able to get a handle on it. So that's going to be a huge risk for tomorrow.
And I have actually, if I can keep going forward on my graphics here. There we go. Red flag warnings. That's those are the warnings that are issued when it's basically like don't go outside doing anything that could start a fire. And a day like tomorrow, with those strong winds, like you were saying, like anything that could potentially start a fire. I'm not just talking about using fire outdoors. I'm talking about you don't want to throw like cigarette butts out the window. Don't want to be doing any kind of grilling or anything like that. Like all of those activities should be avoided completely tomorrow when we have these winds in the area.
Do you think that the rain that we did have come through will help like keep that calm at all? Or do you think the wind and that we've had kind of since those storms has dried out the grass enough where if something sparks, it's gonna be bad?
I mean, we've definitely had about what has been a week or so now since we've had that rain, so there's been a little bit of time in between it, enough to dry things out, like you said. We're not in any type of severe drought at this point or anything like that, so that's good news, is that we're not in any horrible drought conditions by any means, but we've definitely had enough time to dry out, let's just say it that way, to where if wildfires were to start, they could spread rapidly.
Yeah, and so I haven't seen an update, but normally what they do is they'll put out a prediction on rate of spread, and so what that more or less is saying is if a fire starts, how fast it'll move. And the last thing that I saw as far as predictions was that they were kind of saying that you could see fire move 200 to 300 feet a minute. So if you think about a fire like that spreading over a half mile or a mile piece of land, it's going to move fast. It's going to have potential for just causing a lot of damage, and so that's definitely the fire and the fire danger tomorrow is something that you want to take seriously. If you pull in a trailer, make sure your chains aren't dragging on the road, because it's amazing how just those types of little sparks. But one thing that we can't really control that does also start a lot of fires is power lines arcing. And so whenever you get winds that are blowing 65, you get those gusts that are 65 or 70, and you get an arcing power line that could start fires. So there's a lot of things that.
And there is potential for that tomorrow, too. When you have wind gusts over 60 miles an hour, I mean, we expect probably some power outage issues. And if the power outage issues comes from power lines snapping or power pole snapping, stuff like that, then, yeah, that's completely, like, not really much control we can have there in terms of, I mean, if a wildfire starts from that, that's just unlucky. But, I mean, those are all the concerns tomorrow. That's why everyone, I'm sure all the firefighters are going to be gearing up for it and going to be fully staffed tomorrow, ready to hopefully keep everything contained tomorrow.
Yeah, I know that the Oklahoma Forestry Service has moved planes, some of their water drop planes to the western part of the United States, the state, not the United States, but of the state. I know they're stationed there in Guthrie and Woodward, last I heard. What other damage? What can people do to keep damage from happening? In your opinion, whenever you got like 70-mile-an-hour winds coming through?
Yeah, so I mean, the most obvious answer is going to be for like people who are staying at home, aren't really causing any problems outside or anything. Like, you just want to secure those objects outside your house or your apartment, wherever you live. I mean, I know that's simpler. Or a lot of people saying, "Oh, all these storms go through the area, we're not going to have any problems." But I mean, it's not like like when storms come through and it's only like 10, 15 minutes of strong winds and then you're done. I mean, this is going to be probably a 5, 6, 7, 8 hour event of the peak wind speeds to where your loose objects outside, trampolines. I mean, hopefully we won't have any flying trampolines, but I mean, that's the joke everyone always has with the winds. But yeah, so you're gonna want to secure those objects for sure outdoors, and that could obviously cause damage to your property if, let's say, a strong wind gust comes through. Throw a chair at your house or something like that. So that's the most obvious thing to me, anyways. It's just those loose objects around your house. They're gonna be blowing around tomorrow, and if you don't secure them, I'm sure you're gonna hear some things flying around. So that's the best thing you could do, I would say.
So you mentioned just a second ago, it could be in a 5 or 6 hour event. What are we looking about time frame? When do we expect the strongest winds to kind of start and end up?
Yeah, and I actually have a graphic for that too here. If I go back, I'll walk through the whole day for you as a whole. So as we go through, we'll start out at, this is 7 a.m. on Friday, so winds will already be picking up a little bit in the morning time, but nothing too crazy. I mean, that's a little bit of a breezy morning, gust up to about 25 miles per hour for most locations possible in the morning time. But then by the late morning hours, so now at 11 a.m., that's when those winds really pick up. We'll see the gust over 60 miles per hour possible, more widespread. The effects will be about 50, 55 miles per hour by the late morning. So that's when I would say the start of the really strong winds is late morning time. And this will last through the whole afternoon. So the whole afternoon, we're still seeing wind gusts up to 50, 55 miles per hour, maybe some isolated pockets getting up to 60, 65 miles per hour possible. And then going into the evening, that's when they'll calm down by about 10 p.m. We'll still be pretty breezy at 10 p.m., but not the 60 mile per hour gust anymore. And then by Saturday morning, we should, for the most part, be done with it, back down to just a moderate breeze. So late morning to the early evening is that time frame.
And along with this, of course, it's not going to affect us, but you're going to have severe weather chances farther east and maybe eastern Oklahoma into Arkansas, things like that. So if you have travel plans and you're going east, that's also something to kind of keep in mind, because outside of our area, we're just going to have the winds and the fire danger, but there's some severe weather threats across the eastern.
Yeah, this is a big system. I mean, there's supposed to be some potential for big, long-track tornadoes in the especially like Dixie Alley area on, I believe, Saturday. And then, Friday, that'll be a little bit more northward in the St. Louis area. So this is a huge system. Not just, we're kind of on the back side of it where we're seeing the dry side of it, so we don't have severe weather chances. But a lot of the country with this same exact system is going to feel storm effects because they have a lot of moisture in the air instead of dry air.
Right. So, all right. So that is kind of what we're expecting tomorrow. Kind of a recap of the Gold tornado. We'll come back every time we have First Alert Weather Days. We're going to do a podcast here, either with Alex or with Barrett, and then we're going to try to do these podcasts, kind of recapping any severe weather outbreaks that we have where we go out chasing and kind of just talk about it and go and educate everyone on kind of what happened and what we were seeing, and just recapping things as the storm season goes on throughout the year. So appreciate you joining us. Catch you next time on Storm Trackers.